Welcome to the Complete Ethical Hacking Bootcamp. Whether you're a complete beginner looking to become an ethical hacker, or you're a student looking to learn about securing computer systems, or you're a programmer who's looking to improve their security online and prevent attacks from hackers on your website, this brand new course will take you from the very basics where we talk about principles and fundamentals of hacking, teaching you everything from scratch, all the way to building exploits together and teaching you different hacking techniques that you can actually use yourself. This way, you will know how black hat hackers operate and what you can do to prevent security attacks on your systems. This course is focused on learning by doing. We're going to teach you how hacking works by actually practicing the techniques and methods used by hackers today. We will start off by creating your own hacking lab to make sure we keep your computer safe throughout the course, as well as doing things legally. Once we have our computer set up for ethical hacking, then we dive into topics like social engineering, reconnaissance, scanning, vulnerability analysis, exploitation and gaining access, post-exploitation, website penetration testing, man-in-the-middle attacks, Wi-Fi cracking, and so much more. Each section will teach you many different hacking techniques. We even teach you Python from scratch for those that want to learn to program their own tools for hacking. Now, obviously, in the course, we're going to be learning all the modern tools and software by hackers today, like Kali Linux, Nmap, Metasploit framework, and many others. But here's the thing. When learning a skill like hacking, you want to be taught by someone who actually works in the industry and has dedicated their lives to this field, not just another online instructor. So, meet Alexa. Alexa is a penetration tester with many years of experience in ethical hacking and cybersecurity. He has worked and discovered vulnerabilities for multiple companies and government systems, and has been lending his skill set to top private companies online for the past 5 years. We guarantee you this is the most comprehensive online course on hacking and security skills. Have a look at the course outline in the next video to see all the topics we're going to cover, all the projects we're going to build, and all the techniques you're going to learn to become a top ethical hacker and penetration tester. We'll take you from zero to mastery. We'll see you inside. Hello! I'm super excited to start this course with you, but as always, before we do, we need to see where we're starting and where we're ending up so we have a clear path to succeeding. So let's see what this course will look like for you. We're first going to start off with creating our hacking lab. Now don't worry whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux, you're going to be able to follow, because what we'll do is use something called a virtual machine. Install Kali Linux, which is often used with ethical hacking, onto our machine so that we can simulate and create our hacking environment. Don't worry, all the tools we're going to use is free, and you're going to be able to set up your computer in a way to follow the rest of the course. And you're also going to have a professional setup. We're also going to cover some basics on hacking, some fundamentals and principles that's going to set us up for success later on in the course. Then we have an optional part. For those that really want to get into programming as well, and possibly programming some of our projects later on in the course, we're going to teach you Python from scratch, or if you know Python already, as a refresher, so that you can also learn an extra skill set for some harder projects that we have in the course. Then we get into the fun part. And the first step we're going to dive into after we have our hacking lab and some of our programming skills sharp is reconnaissance. Here is where we learn what we call footprinting, or in other words, information gathering. Once we choose our target, our first task is to gain as much information about the target as possible. We're going to talk about IP addresses, about the Whois tool, the stealth scan, finding usernames, building an email scraper tool, and other tools available to us to gather as much information as possible. From there, we go into scanning, and where things get real. In this section, we gather information on some of the technical information that we acquire from a target. For example, if they have open ports, if they have a firewall, what software they're running on these ports, and if they have any outdated operating systems. And don't worry, if you don't know what any of this means, we take you from scratch and you're going to learn it all. Here is where we learn about TCP, UDP, using the powerful Nmap tool, different types of scans that we can do, how to work with Firewall, using decoys and packet fragmentation. And we're also going to build a port scanner project in this section. From there, we go into vulnerability analysis. In this section, we use the information that we gathered from the previous sections, and with this information, we try to determine whether there is a known vulnerability that we can take advantage of. We're going to use different sorts of tools to learn about our target system and where their weaknesses are. We're actually going to work a Windows 7 machine that has a vulnerability and show how we can break into it and how we can use that to our advantage. Then, well, this is the exciting part. This is the big part of the course. This is where we attack and gain access to the target machines. And throughout this session, we'll be covering many different vulnerability attacks on machines and cover a very important tool of an ethical hacker. That is the Metasploit framework. The goal of exploitation is to get on a target machine. So this means we must drop payload hard so we can use it to navigate through their systems, look through their files, execute anything we want, even delete target knowing anything about it. We'll look at our own viruses and Trojans that we can deliver to the target, whether through an email or This is a big section, and we're going to dive into the weeds, try out these techniques, learn to defend against them. After that, we have what we call the post-exploit. This is what we do after we exploit a target. Since we're on that machine, we can do many things depending on what we want to get out from it. At the end, after we do all the things we wanted by getting them, to make sure we cover our tracks by deleting any event logs or deleting evidence that we were ever on that machine. We're going to learn lots of things here, such as creating persistent and even creating a backdoor in one of our projects. We then get into a very important part that a lot of you might find very, very interesting, and that is web penetration testing. This is a big topic for an ethical hacker, and in this, we're mainly getting sites and their bugs and vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities can be anything from SQL injections, information disclosures, command injections, site hacks. And we're also going to code and create our own project, a login and also a directory discovery tool. Again, in this section, you're going to learn how to use these techniques for defend against them on your own website or a client. Then we get into something that you have to know as an ethical hacker. It's the man-in-the-middle attack. This is an attack that is used, and this allows us to sniff any unencrypted data and see it in plain text. So we could use this technique to see passwords for some websites. And we're going to cover some of the main tools that hackers use when doing a middle attack. We then have a section on wireless cracking. This is the section where we want to gain access to a network by wireless password. And we're going to talk about air crack, password cracking, and hash cracking, and show you how you might use this, how hackers might use this on your wireless network. Now, we got lots to cover, but I also want to talk about right here. Our online private community of over 300,000 students. We have people chatting here every day, finish the course, doing challenges together, and talking about the greatest in technology. This is an optional resource for you to use so you can have back and forth with other students and myself, so you like you're part of a real classroom. I know you're getting excited, I am too, so let's get started and let's learn.
Welcome to the complete ethical hacking course. In this course, we will be covering everything you need to know as an ethical hacker, from theory to the practical examples. We will start with basics first, and the further we go in the course, the more intermediate and advanced stuff we will cover. Knowing theory and practice different attack methods that we will learn will eventually make you a master in ethical hacking. But wait a second. We just started the course, I'm already talking about being a master in ethical hacking. Let's slow a little bit. What even is ethical hacking? And what does an ethical hacker do? Or you might also wonder, can I get in trouble by doing this? Don't worry. Remember, we are ethical hackers. This means we are hired to hack into a network or a device, or in general, we want to find as many vulnerabilities inside the target system, but not to do bad things. Quite opposite, we want to secure them. An ethical hacker who is hired to find as many vulnerabilities in a certain system is also known as a white hat hacker. Now, I mentioned a word system quite a few times by now. What do I mean by finding vulnerabilities in a system? Well, system can be anything. It can be a network of multiple computers, or it could be just one single computer. It could also be some company's server that they keep their important data on. We could also be targeting a web page or a website. A vulnerability, on the other hand, is anything that could allow someone to have an unauthorized access to that system. We are there to discover them and secure them. But why are we doing this? Well, as you know, there are the bad guys, or also known as black hat hackers. Their goal is also to find vulnerabilities in a system, but not to secure them. Instead, they want to perform malicious activity once they gain access to that system. That is the difference between a white hat hacker and a black hat hacker. A white hat hacker is there to find vulnerability, notify the person that hired him, and let him know of a possible unauthorized access. You can think of us as a cyber police. We are there to protect. A black hat hacker, on the other hand, is there to perform malicious activity such as stealing your data. They could also try to steal your online money. They could install a virus or a keylogger on your PC and track everything that you do. They can go as far as doing something like stealing your identity. However, the methods white hat and black hat hackers use can be quite similar. The difference is we as white hat hackers must make sure that we have a permission to target a certain system. An example would go like this. We get hired by a certain company. That company could have a website, different networks with computers inside the building where, for example, employees work. It could also have large servers and databases holding important company data. And as we already know, our goal is to make sure that data is secured from cyber attacks, that also employees and their machines are also a secure network, and that website doesn't have any bugs that could present a threat to that company. How do we do all of this? Well, we do it by attacking the company. We act as a black hat hacker would, but with a different goal. Okay, here we come to another problem. You might be wondering, well, how am I going to learn this? How am I going to practice this? I just said that we need a permission to attack any system, right? Well, don't worry. We will simulate all of these targets with the help of our home devices, and also with the help of virtual machines. It will be exactly the same, just this way you won't be breaking any law while you practice, since targets that you will attack will be yours. Okay, more about virtual machines later. Right now I want to give you a small challenge. One of the biggest online cyber attacks is something called phishing. In most cases, phishing is an act of black hat hackers tricking you into entering some of your private data, such as usernames and passwords, into a web page that isn't to be trusted. This is one of the ways how they steal online accounts. Let me show you. Here I have two Twitter login pages. One of these two that you can see right here is a fake login. First, look at the second one. Right, figured out which one is real and which one is the fake login page, while the second one is real. I mentioned some of the obvious reasons why this page right here that you're looking at page. that can be used to learn. Even though they are identical, if we take a closer look, we can see .com as the web random IP address in our search tab indication that this page is indeed. You should enter any private information here. The original page should be Twitter.com. Another links to the website name on a real green lock right here. It is secured, as it says right here. Usually phishing won't be HTTPS and however, this too can be more or fake login page does have. If it says connection is not secure, it will be new if you are not redirected to the page. In just a few seconds, has been compromised, and so the information that you enter this page gets sent to them and not to Twitter. Throughout the course, we will learn not secure, and also we will learn how to perform tasks and the Discord channel where we enter. Just so on Discord, since that is with everyone about any new course updates. That is also where you can reach out to us. It's run during the less. I welcome you once again, and let's get straight into the course. It is time we discuss different scan types that we can do with Nmap. Now, Nmap is a huge tool, and it offers many different types of scans that we can perform, and we will be covering just some since there are a lot of them. However, at the end of this video, I will give you a really good tip as to how you can really master the Nmap tool. Talking about different scans doesn't necessarily mean that we will get different results. In fact, many of these different scans will give us the same result. And in this video, I'm going to explain exactly what the differences are between certain scans. To really understand this, you will need a background knowledge on TCP and UDP. So, in case you didn't watch the short video I made on TCP and UDP, make sure to watch it before covering this. Let's start with the first type of scan, and that scan is called TCP SYN scan. Let me open the terminal. The command that we must run is nmap-ss, and then we're going to be scanning Metasploitable in this video, since that is the machine that we are attacking. So the IP address of my Metasploitable is 192.168.1.6, and this -ss is TCP SYN scan. SYN scan is probably the most popular scan in Nmap. It can be performed quickly, thousands of ports per second on networks that aren't protected by a firewall, and the reason why it's called a SYN scan is because it never really opens a full TCP connection. You only perform the step of three-way handshake, which is sending SYN. And the way it works is, if the target sends SYNAC back for a certain port, that indicates that that port is listening or it is open. Target can also send something called RST, which stands for reset, which would indicate that the port is closed. In case it doesn't give any response back after several tries, port will be marked as filtered. And filtered is another state of ports that happens once Nmap cannot determine whether a certain port is open or closed. The filtered state could happen if port is, for example, protected by some filtering or a firewall. And now that we know exactly how TCP SYN scan works, let's test it out on our Metasploitable. There is one thing with this command. If I try to run it, it will not work. It will tell me you require the scan type which requires root privileges. And the reason this requires root privileges is because we're only sending one part of three-way handshake and telling our machine that we do not want to respond to a SYNAC bitset in case it is sent back from the target. That requires privileges. So we must run this with sudo nmap-ss, and then let's type in our password. And we will notice it gives us the results of ports that are open very fast. And it is also very important and satisfying once we know how certain scan type works. Once again, it sends only the SYN and waits for SNAC or RST, and it never establishes a full TCP connection. Let us check out the result. So we got these ports open, and we also got what service is running on those open ports. Now, here's the time that it took, and we're going to compare this with different scans. And the reason it finished this fast is, once again, it doesn't establish a connection. Compared to this SYN scan that we just performed, we also got something called TCP connect scan, or also labeled as -st. So in order to run this, we can just change this command from -ss to -st. And you will see all of these options if you run the help menu of Nmap. What's interesting about this is that it does not require sudo privileges. And the reason it does not require is because it performs a normal TCP three-way handshake connection. So the only difference between this and previous scan is that TCP connect scan establishes a full connection. The important part here that you should remember is that this scan will leave much more trace that you performed an Nmap scan on the target machine, and it is easily detected. That's why once you can run Nmap as root, usually SYN scan will be a better option than the TCP connect scan. Nonetheless, let's test this one out so we can remove sudo, as it does not require root privileges. And you will see it also finishes relatively fast. The output will be exactly the same as with the SYN scan, but sometimes it could take a little bit longer than the SYN scan since it is performing a full TCP connection. And even though we got the exact same result, which are just the open ports and the services that they run, now we know how both of these scans work. And now you know that, for example, this scan is much more detectable than the SYN scan. Or you can say that it just makes more noise on target machine. The last scan that we're going to cover, and keep in mind these are just some of the scans, and I will show you where you can find the rest of them and possibly test them out if you want to. The next scan that I'm going to cover is pretty unpopular, and that is the -su scan, or also known as UDP scan. The reason why it's unpopular is because many services on the internet run over TCP protocol, as we already know. Since UDP scanning is much slower than TCP scanning and more difficult, sometimes when people are developing security for their ports, they ignore the UDP ports. And this results in a mistake, as there are a lot of exploitable UDP services, and we should never ignore this scan just because it takes. Let us test it out. This also will require sudo privileges, so let's sudo nmap-su for the UDP scan and specify the IP address of Metasploitable. You will notice this scan will take time. You can check at how much % it is currently at by pressing the upper arrow key. Press upper arrow key. Down here it will tell me it is currently at 3%. And I'm just going to leave this running while I show you the cool tip for the Nmap. So remember this, the key to learning Nmap in great details is not in reading its help menu, but in reading its manual. And to open the Nmap manual, you can open your terminal and type manual Nmap. And let me do this, a second terminal, so I will open it up, type man, and then Nmap. This man right here is shortened for manual. Press enter. In this file, it explains every Nmap option in great detail. Let us find different scan types that also exist, since we didn't really cover every one of them. Let's scroll all the way down to different Nmap scans. And as we're scrolling, you will see that we are passing the actual help menu that we get outputted once we run the -- help. And below this menu, it explains every option in great details. And as I'm scrolling, I came to this part which says port scanning basics. And here are the 6 port states recognized by Nmap. And this is good to read. So we got the open port state, the closed port state, we got filtered port state, unfiltered port state, open and filtered, and closed and filtered. So if you want, read through this. It is really useful knowing once you get, for example, filtered ports, to know exactly what that means. And if I go a little bit more down, here they are. Here are the different scan types that Nmap has. So here is the TCP SYN scan that we performed, which is -SS. Here is ST, which is full TCP connection scan. And down here you will notice after the UDP scan that we got different options as to how we can perform our scan. And you can read about each and every one of them and see when are they useful and how you classify them. Here is the TCP ACK scan, here's the TCP window scan, and you will see there are a lot of them. There are also different options such as this scan flags, which is custom TCP scan, but this is an advanced option and we might take a look at this later on. Here is idle scan, echo scan, let's see all the way down, IP protocol scan, FTP relay host, FTP bound scan, and that would pretty much be it for the Nmap scans. So depending on your target and what you exactly want to get from this scan, you would pick one of them. So for example, if you wanted to discover open ports, you would use the TCP SYN scan. Now the ACK scan, I believe, which is the -SA, which we saw a few seconds ago, is useful, I believe, to mapping out the firewall. Just read through them if you have time, and you will discover how they work and when are they useful. So let's see how much percentage our UDP scan is at. So it has finished about 1/3 of the scan, and we know that it will take at least 10 to 15 more minutes, so we're not going to wait this. And by the way, about the Nmap manual, you don't need to read that entire file, just it is good to know that it exists. So sometimes when you forget something or you want to check out if Nmap has some other option that you need, you can just open that manual and read until you find what you need. Nobody expects you to know everything inside of that file, but after some time you will start picking some of the commands up and memorizing them. Cool. We covered a lot in this video. The next 2 videos will be even more important. We're going to check how we can discover operating systems that our target machines run and what versions of services are they running on an open port, which is, remember, one of the most important things. Let us talk about different options we can use in our scans to bypass Firewall. Firewall is something unpredictable. You don't really know its rules in order to know exactly what type of scan you need to perform in order to bypass it. Some of the firewalls could use MAC address filtering in order to allow certain devices to connect to a specific port, or in order to lock a certain devices. Some firewalls could block different types of packets. Some firewalls could block only some ports and not all of them, and we can't really know what the exact rule is. What I'm going to do is I will give you a few different options as to what you can try in order to bypass Firewall. First of all, how can we know if some of the ports on target machine are behind a firewall? We already mentioned this in the previous video. Nmap will tell us that those ports are filtered. By now, we should already know what filtered port is, but let us define it once again. Filtered port is when Nmap can't figure out whether a certain port is open or closed, and that is due to it dropping packets, possibly because that port is behind a firewall. Therefore, we don't get any responses back from that port, and Nmap flags it's filtered. Let me show you this on a Windows machine. Right here, I have Windows 7 virtual machine, and this virtual machine, if I go to the control panel, and then System and Security, and Windows Firewall, this machine, Firewall turned on. If we try to scan it using SYN-scan, which we covered in the previous, so let's do it right here. Remember, it requires sudo privileges, so sudo nmap ss and then the IP address. I will use the IP address of my Windows 7 virtual machine. And if I press here enter, type in the password, in just a few seconds the scan will finish. And we're going to compare this result when the firewall is turned on with the result once we turn off the firewall. So let's wait for this to end. And here it is. It doesn't have any port open. Matter of fact, it tells me all 1000 scanned ports on this PC are filtered. Now, this doesn't mean that all could be closed or all could be opened. This just means that they are behind the firewall, and any packets we send get dropped by that firewall. So our target could have a few ports open and other closed, but we don't really know that. Let me show you the response of the same scan once we have that target turn off their firewall. So let's go to Windows machine, and I will click on this turn Windows firewall on or off. And in both of these settings, I will select turn off Windows firewall. Click OK. And now, once the firewall is turned off, let us perform the same scan that we did right here. So we'll just use upper arrow, run the same command, and here's. We can see that some ports are indeed open. This firewall right here doesn't have any special rules since it is made to block all traffics, so techniques that I'm about to show you in these few videos will not work on regular machines that just turn on their firewall and that don't accept any type of connection. However, once firewall rules are applied, and they usually are applied in some servers or machines that need remote access or to communicate with other machines, then we can test these options and see whether those rules have any vulnerability that we can bypass. I will turn the firewall back on right here. I will close this, and let's start with our first option. We're going to use an option -f. So if I clear the screen and type the command sudo nmap -f and then the IP address, this -f option causes the requested scan to use tiny fragmented IP packets. Now you might be wondering, why would we do that? Well, the idea behind this is to split TCP header over several packets to make it harder for packet filters or intrusion detection systems to detect what you're doing. If we specify the options just by adding one -f, the Nmap will split the packets into 8 bytes or less. So if your packet had a 24 bytes TCP header, this would be split into 3 different packets of 8 bytes. Now you can also specify the option twice with -f and then once again -f, and this will split the packets into 16 bytes per fragment. But be careful once running this option on an actual target, as some programs have trouble handling these tiny packets. If you want to increase fragment size even more, you can use the option --mtu, and after it the fragment size. Just remember that offset you specify must be a multiple of 8. This fragmentation won't always work. If I run this scan, this option will not work most of the time actually. It only works if a network that you're scanning can afford the hit that this will cause. Therefore, they just leave it disabled. Some networks also can't enable this because fragments may take different routes into their networks. Nonetheless, it is good to mention this option, as it might come in handy one day. Another option we can use, which is more focused on hiding your IP address than bypassing security, and that option is creating decoys using -d. So if I specify dash and then capital D, create decoy scan makes it appear to the target as it has been scanned not only by you, but also by the decoys that you specify. So their intrusion detection system might report multiple IP addresses that scan them, including yours. But they will not be able to determine which one is real. So you successfully hid your IP address from them. There are 2 ways you can do this. And just to show you how this works, what I'm going to do is I will open a software called Wireshark on my Windows 10 machine. And with this software, we will be able to see which IP addresses are communicating my Windows 10 machine. Now you don't need to have Wireshark for now, just pay attention to the scans that we perform and results that we get in Wireshark. Right here, I will select Ethernet, since this is what I'm currently using, and we should already see some packets coming in. But these packets right here have nothing to do with our scan. So if I go back to my Cal Linux, and I run the command sudo nmap-d, and to specify how many random IP addresses we want to use to scan the target, we can specify -d and then rnd, 2 dots, then the number of IP addresses we want to use. So in this case, I will use 5 random IP addresses. If I press enter right here and go to my Wireshark, it doesn't seem to be flooding anything. Are we successfully scanning? Oh, that's right, we are scanning Windows 7 machine, my bad, so we need to be scanning our Windows 10 machine, so let me check the IP address of my Windows 10. ipconfig 192.168.1.7, and right here I will just change from 16 to 17. And let's go back to Wireshark once again. It doesn't seem to show for some reason. Let us try adding this command, and we will use the synscan to perform this. Press enter. And the reason this might not work is because sometimes Wireshark will have a problem capturing the packets that we send from a virtual machine. And that is mostly because we're scanning our host machine from the virtual machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my laptop and run the same command. Give me just a second, and I'm running the same command that we ran right here. I just ran it, and if I go back here we can see now the output. We can see that our Windows 10 machine is getting flooded with random IP addresses. If I stop it, I can see different IP addresses right here. So we got 193.245.213.77. We also got the other IP addresses, but I will also see my laptop's IP address, and it kind of sticks out. Since this RND option that we used creates random IP addresses, all of those random IP addresses will be truly random, while the only IP address that will stick out will be this 192.168.1.10, and that is a local IP. This will most likely not work. They will recognize it as the true IP. So how can we change this and make it seem like the scan is coming from 5 local IP addresses that belong to my home network? Instead of running the command like this, what we can do is we can run the command like this, so sudo nmap and then -d, and after d we specify 5 different IP addresses including ours. So we'll specify 192.168.1.2. Let's also use 192.168.1.5 for example. Let's use 192.168.1.6. Let's use 192.168.1.15. And let's use my IP address. And to specify the Cal Linux IP address, we can simply type me. What this command will do is it will use these random IP addresses to scan the target, including our true IP address. So all we need to specify is the IP address of my Windows 10 machine. And if I run this, go back to Wireshark. Yeah, of course, once again, I must run this from the actual laptop in order for this to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the command in just a second. And I'm running it right now. If I go to my Wireshark, here we can see now it is getting flooded with local IP addresses. We can see 192.168.1.2, .1.5, .1.15, and .1.10. And they will never really realize that this one is the correct IP address, since they are getting flooded with a lot of them. And you can change this number, you can use more IP addresses if you want, or less. But the point of this is that in case you're scanning a target that is inside the same network as you, use local IP addresses. And in case you're scanning the target that is outside your network, you can use this option right here, which will generate random IP addresses. And the security will have a hard time figuring out which one is the correct one. Cool, right? Now, don't worry, since this didn't work on my Windows 10 machine. The only reason it didn't work is because my Kali Linux machine uses the same network interface as my Windows 10 host machine. If you were to scan any other target except your host machine, this would work in every case. So for now, we looked at these two options, and in the next video, I will just quickly mention a few more options used to evade security, and then we will proceed to vulnerability analysis, which is the last step before we start gaining access to